Good morning, good evening, welcome everyone, and welcome to this, I believe, the 18th episode of this Indic chat. I'm your host, Abhinav Agarwal, and I'm going to be talking with a slightly unusual guest today in more ways than one. First, as you know, this month we celebrate 70 years of India becoming independent, that we are still not free from the clutches of colonialism and mental enslavement is quite another thing, and I'm really hoping that our guest today will share his experiences in on that topic. But again, as I said, that's a topic in itself for another day and another chat. So for those of you who know me, I'm going to try and do something different today. I'm going to try and be positive. I shed some of my natural cynicism for an hour or so, and we'll focus on the good news that is all around us, so difficult though it may be to spot. And our guest today is a believer in exactly that, the good news. So coming back to my point, which is that we celebrate 70 years of our independence, I've already said that. So what better way to mark this month than by talking with someone who has literally lived through this era. He was born before 1947, in the era of pre-independent colonial India, has recollections, even some vivid memories that he's going to share with us of that time. And he has lived through partition, through Pandit Nehru's era, liberalization, and more. So without any further ado, let me welcome our guest today, which is Sridharan, self-confessed sea dog, an Anglophile who rediscovered that he was a Hindu at the age of 70. And he has been featured in the Reader's Digest, and which showcased his work on a 15-acre plot of land near Chennai. He has his website, goodnewsindia.com, and he has another venture, and he's going to talk about that. So, with all of that, welcome all, and a very hearty welcome to you, Sri Devi. Good evening.
Good evening, Abhinav. Thank you. Thank you. I know so much about you. I've been a keen follower of your chat shows, and I'm very fond of your book reviews. They go far beyond book reviews. They certainly promote the books you're writing about, but then you also promote a fondness for reading. I love your work. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for
Thank you. So I will not go about this chronologically, but I do want to start with the era before partition, since you were born before partition. Now, I believe you were if I may use the word, you were a lad of about 5 when India got independence. Do you have any recollections from that time of colonial India, of partition, and or even memories of the British, of the English?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I think I have a precocious memory. I mean, I recalled many things quite vividly, not in great detail, but generally fairly accurately. One of the first things I remember was being carried into the Meenakshi temple in Madurai by my mother, who was about 24 years old. And that must have been 1946. So Gandhi was coming, so she took me and somehow forced herself in, and then got me blessed, touched and blessed by Gandhi. I mean, I remember the buzz of the...
Devi, if I may request you to be a little louder, I think your voice is coming a little low.
Yeah. That was the first recollection that I do have of being the same space as Gandhi in Madurai, and my mother's arms. And then shortly thereafter, my mother died, and I moved to a place called Tambaram, which is far... It used to be a different town from Chennai. Now it's a suburb of Chennai. It is a college town, Madras Christian College, and the Air Force Base. And I grew up for the next 7 years with my grandfather. And that's when India got free. And but before that, the war ended. I remember that. My grandfather reading out to me, the war is over. But before that, he told me a big bomb had been dropped in Japan. I remember that too. And he told me about the horror of the bomb. And I listened to that. And then we lived in, I don't know how much detail I should go into, but then since you asked me, let me indulge myself. We lived in a large house where we paid a rent of about 20 rupees, I think. And our neighbors were four Englishmen. They lived in a house of their own. And there were a lot of cows, and they were quite periodically used to shoot a cow and carve
Really?
it up, share it among their friends. I think, I don't know what happened. So I used to run up to the fence and watch the cow being slaughtered. And I would run back and tell my grandfather, another cow gone. He used to be quite furious. And he used to tell me, Gandhi is going to throw them out. You just wait. He used to say that. And so Gandhi was a big name. He was already quite a popular name for me. And then one day he told me, we are free. Shortly, in a few days, India will become free. He told me that too. I remember that. I was quite excited. I didn't know what it meant. So, but then he said, we'll be our own, we'll rule ourselves. And all the Englishmen in the neighborhood, they were all gone. And they did shortly thereafter. So I remember that. And I remember the flag hoisting in a little park next to the house. About 10, 15 people showed up, and we all dressed in our washed clothes, not ironed. In those days, nobody ironed their clothes. So sun-dried clothes. So I remember that. That's about all. It was a small college professor's colony, and we lived in a large hut. I was a barefoot schoolboy, quite happy. So that's
So,
pre-independence India and India becoming independent. I remember being taken to Chennai city. We took an electric train the first time I went. He took me to show the illumination of Madras city. It was all lit up beautifully. And there was crowds wall to wall. It was hemmed by crowds. My grandfather carried me and showed me all the lights. And I thought something extraordinary is going to happen following that. India becoming free.
but it didn't in many ways. While a lot of the people who were aware at that time when India got independent, maybe there was this excitement that something extraordinary would happen, but as we all know, it didn't really. But I want to ask you about, you said you are, and you were an Anglophile, and for someone who grew up in Pandit Nehru's India, for our viewers, excuse my saying so, but self-loathing was not altogether surprising in a country that was desperately poor and unable to, bring itself out of poverty with the Nehruvian rate of growth of 2 and 3%. And you also had eminent authors like Nirad Chaudhary and the early phase of Naipaul that sort of accentuated that sense of despondency and self-loathing about India, and whose writings were marked by harsh critiques on India, the country, and even India, the civilization itself. And we know that Naipaul changed his views in the 1970s. But do tell us about that era where I believe you said you experienced a sort of a cultural alienation.
Yeah, I'll let it go back a little bit, if I may. I got to start a little earlier too, so that there's the continuity in what I'm saying. See, both Gandhi and Nehru were heroes to me for many, many years. In real time, they were heroes. And my subsequent critique of them came much later, when I became aware of the realities of the politics, looking back at the politics. But in real time, they were very big heroes to me.
Divi, can I interrupt you and request you to maybe check your computer's volume, your mic volume? I'm getting a couple of people who are saying that your volume is fairly low, and even I am finding it a little difficult to catch everything.
I'm surprised. So let me come closer to the screen. Is it better now?
It is somewhat better. Is your computer's microphone?
Little later, shortly after independence, I went away to Bangalore. My mother had died, and I rejoined her father when I was 10. And I went to a Tamil medium school, and I do want to talk a little bit about those days. Am I coming through now?
Yes, it's better.
All right. Okay. Now, I used to be taken to Nehru's meetings by somebody or the other, and he was a big hero. But slowly, I think the people were very, very concerned in those days, mostly about permanence of jobs, tenure, and everyone wanted to retire from jobs they could get. Jobs were not easy to get. So the whole accent was to go away from your culture and disown it and learn English. You see, English was an aspirational language. It was a key to getting a job, and everyone aspired to it. And I must go back to it. And already there had been a cultural disruption. The first wave of migrations from the villages of the Brahmins had already happened. And I remember going to my village about near Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu, here near Chennai. I got taken several times by my grandfather. I'm very grateful to him for that. But then the Brahmins had already migrated. Several years later, they were to migrate from there to the US, where they mostly are. But then they all migrated for jobs. And one of the keys was English. So my father insisted I should go to a Tamil medium school and learn Tamil. But he was not particular about my learning Sanskrit, which is, to my great regret, I lost out on. He himself knew it very well. He had been raised orthodoxly. He wore studs, diamond studs in his ears and a tuft until he was a teen, and he hated it. He knocked it off, and he didn't want to do that to me. So English was an aspirational thing. So after the Tamil medium school, I longed to learn English. And I found I had no self-confidence about speaking it. I could read it after a fashion. So the desire to learn English was the beginning of the Anglophilia that developed much later, you see. And that was fairly the way with my entire generation. We all wanted to know. In our house, there were 3 books. I still remember just 3 books in English. One was Cakes and Ales by Somerset Maugham. I couldn't pronounce his name then. And then there was a book by Aldous Huxley. And there was a 3rd book, Bhagavad Gita. And that's the English book. I used to riffle through it all the time, not knowing how to read. So the aspiration to learn English began then. And it was many, many years. It was another 10 years before I could read a whole English book. But I loved that language. And slowly, the alienation began that I loved it so much that I slowly put distance between myself and Tamil. I don't think I read as much in Tamil as I do in English today.
So let me ask you a question, Devi. You said that as you started to learn English, your alienation with Tamil began. Anything in particular that led you to experience that alienation? Any causal factor?
Yeah, there was this, you see. I'm talking about Bangalore of 1952 to 58. I mean, that's going way over a century ago. We lived in a district called Agarwal. That's where the poorer Indians lived. And the cantonment area, which was defined by the Bangalore Museum and the MG Road, it used to be called the South Parade, and there was the Brigade Road. And to enter that, I used to be frightened because most people spoke in English there. And my first forays into reading English was comics, Dell comics and the classics. And I used to put about 10 or 20 of those in my bicycle and ride all the way to Brigade Road, where a chap used to change them for 10 paisa per book after a read. You gave your old one and you could pick new one from the big pile on the floor. I used to be frightened. Everyone spoke English and I couldn't speak English. I could read the comics, I could understand it. So it became a big desire. And then I started neglecting Tamil. And I thought this is a bit of an infra language. Everyone must speak English. And the alienation began there. And quite a lot of my generation did that. But very proud of being an Indian, though. That is true. But then English as an aspirational skill that was there. I must admit. So,
Let me.
you asked me about the much later. The further alienation came as I went along. Should I talk about it now, or would you?
Let me ask you. Actually, no. Let me move a little forward in time, and let me ask you about this. You've written about this on your blog, but this incident on the train near Bilaspur. And I believe that was something of a turning point in your life. And this is something that came fairly late in your life. I believe you were in your 50s at that point. And as I said, you have written about it on your website. But do tell us, from a sense of cultural alienation to a turning point, and that too in your sixth decade of life. Tell us about it.
See, but that's about my coming back, finding my path back. Lost, alienated Indian, utterly unskilled in our ways, and it arose because of myself, the deliberate distance that I put. But I'm afraid, I got to go back a little bit. After my school, I went away to Bombay, and I started training for the sea. You see. I spent 3 years in Bombay preparing for the Merchant Navy. And as I went around Bombay, it was one removed. Like I told you, cantonment area was English speaking. Bombay was almost like the West. So in Bombay, I saw much, and I was convinced that my future lay with the West. And I began to read in English. I read very widely, and mostly what was popular then: Evelyn Waugh, Graham Greene, J.B. Priestley, and all these people. And so there, I grew further and further, and I traveled the next. That added to the disinclination to own up to being the real Indian that I was inside, and try to become a phony Westerner, an Englishman. And so, to come back to the question, what led me to the Bilaspur and the other things was I came back to India and I settled down in a job. I left the sea and I got married. 6 years later, I was bereaved in my marriage. My wife died. And I said, I was shell-shocked. So I said, instead of just resuming, I had a hectic social life and I was in business. And I said, let me go and find out what happened to me. I didn't want to get back on the conveyor belt and pretend as though nothing had happened and carry on. So I said, I'm going to quit everything and I start again fundamentally. But I didn't know what to do with it, fundamentally, what I should be doing with myself. I still have continued reading books. So I must share this experience. It's almost a freaky kind of experience. Higginbotham's was a big bookshop. I used to haunt it. I used to be haunting the aisles all the time. I used to be there every week. And one day, a book literally leapt off the shelves and came into my hands, so to speak, you know. And that name of the book, I won't forget. It is called The Secret Life of Plants. And that book is still there, and whoever is listening to the program, I would urge them to read it. It's still a dramatic, simply written. It's written by two people, by Bird and Tompkins. That changed me. I didn't know anything about the soil or trees. This book changed me. It showed me something worthwhile to pursue in life.
How? I mean, what was there in that book, The Secret Life of Plants, that it really, grabbed you?
Yeah, it's about the world of nature. And it talked about diversity and how plants have sensitivity and how it can consume a whole life, how it can spend time immersing in the environment and how we have destroyed the environment. It talked about America. The two guys were American. They talked about how the dust bowls of America had been created out of fertile prairies in Iowa and Dakota and all these places. So how to fight back, how to come back, the preciousness of water and the preciousness of natural agriculture. It talked all about that, the importance of trees. And I was all of 36 and I didn't know anything about it. And this book changed me. So I knew suddenly what to do with my life. I had been bereaved, but then I said, I'll buy a large piece of land and I'll plant trees, I said. So I bought a bit of sand dunes near Chennai, and I was broke. I didn't have any money, little money. I started living utterly alone, very poor, but not starving, just enough to eat. But I was muscular, I was strong, I was physically quite strong. I read and I planted trees, and I'm glad to say some of them are still there. But that's not the land where I'm now working on, that's the later one. This was my comeback. This book was a comeback. Going forward, I lived in a village completely. I mean, it is only 25 kilometers from Chennai. But in those days, I'm talking about 1978, it was a rural part. I remember seeing a village play, Tirukuthu, we call it in Tamil. All right, in 1981, I think, the last Tirukuthu I saw in my village. It started at 10 o'clock, it went on till 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a story from Mahabharata. I remember that, and I didn't know a thing about it. And the people were natural, happy, there were festivals, Tiruviras. I slowly started coming back into it. And I remembered my village trips when I was a small boy. And I discovered how alienated I had become. And then a little further, there's a second book that changed me. There's a book by Geeta Mehta, River Sutra. Subsequently, the connoisseurs of fine writing did much like it, but for me, it was a great book. It was about the Narmada, and it wrote about the Jain custom of doing the parikrama around the Narmada. They walked on the bank one way, came to Amarkantak, and walked back on the other shore and went back to Gujarat. This was fascinating. It was beautifully written. And that book changed me enormously. Because as soon as I put it down, I said, I got to go and see Narmada and go to Amarkantak. And I had my train tickets booked. And that was in the year 1999. And that changed me. And they began to long for India. I lost. I don't think I can quite make a comeback because I didn't quite invest in myself in terms of Sanskrit and other learning. I'm quite bereft. I'm illiterate in India's way.
So, let me ask you. So, what led you to onto that train journey in 1999, and what sequence of circumstances led you to find yourself in Bilaspur of all places? I mean, I doubt if many of us would have heard of the town Bilaspur. Those who have not lived in Madhya Pradesh or what is Chhattisgarh now.
No, Geeta Mehta's book said how to get to Amarkantak and where the Narmada originated. He traced the origin of Narmada from Amarkantak and all the way to the Arabian Sea. And I did my homework, and I knew that I had to go to a place called Pendra Road and take a bus. And to get to Pendra Road, I got to go to Bilaspur. And that's how I found myself in Bilaspur. And I was happy to learn that early it was a lovely old town. And then I got into the train, and that's when I met this young couple, Sonu and Golu, a brother and sister.
Sonu and Golu, right?
And I forget the boy's name. She was a ravishingly beautiful girl. She was a lovely country girl with, equivalent to the English rose. It was lovely. And he was a lovely, obedient younger brother to the sister. And I had very little English. Very little Hindi. But I was I braved on. I led them into conversation. And they opened my eyes. And the girl said something which struck me. She says, I was asking, where Go to see Singapore and the world and all that. And she said, yeah, but I pray to Bhagwan that he gives me a husband who will keep me in these parts. I don't want to leave Anupur in Chhattisgarh ever. This is the best part of the world. I don't want to ever leave it. And I asked the boy, what do you want to do? He says, Fauj. You know? I said, is that because of the Kargil war? It had just ended. But the sister interrupted very proudly. He says, no. He has been wanting to go to the Fauj ever since he was a small boy. And that woke me up. I said, in the towns, there was a wanting to migrate out of the cities and go and become like I was. I couldn't speak for about others, a kind of a pseudo Westerner that I had become. And here there were these rooted people close to the soil. The next 3 days in Amarkantak, I met some extraordinary people. I actually wandered through with a Beel tribal companion through the woods there, and I actually saw a man living in a little hut. He was a sannyasi, and he was living all by himself. I spent an afternoon with him talking, and he shared his adventures. And I saw people sitting on the banks of the Narmada in penance. These are all things that I had only read about in books. So then I told myself that I'm going to go and meet more and more of these people and make my comeback. And that's when I began Good News India. I worked in it for 6 years. Am I telling you more than you wanted to know? Please let me know.
No, absolutely. In fact, wanted to, want to ask, and I will get to asking you about Good News India. But you talked about people living in villages, and there was a connect that you experienced with the real India at that point. I want to ask you that people have said that India lives in her villages, and more than one famous person has said that, and you have written about it on your website also. But can you elaborate a little bit about that for us? That is, what was it in your mind, in your experiences that you had when traveling through India that led you to believe that India was, or whatever it was that defines India or defined India at that point, could be found more in villages than towns?
See, before that, I really don't want to denigrate the people who live in the towns, and when they went out, they also played the part. But I think of the Indian civilization, that is India's civilization, which I'll openly say is substantially Hindu, as a huge flywheel in terms of a engineering metaphor. It's a giant flywheel, bigger than the London Eye, I think. And I think number of people keep pushing it to keep it alive, and it's spinning. And it's gained such a momentum, it's hard to stop. That's what has kept India's civilization going. And that's my understanding as a lay person who is not extremely well read. And these little gentle pushes are being given by millions of unknown Indians, And they're all in the villages, the blacksmith and the village priest and the bullock cart driver and the farmhand and the landlords and the people who maintain the village tanks and the goldsmiths, the Vishwakarmas. There's a huge, it's like when you lift a rock, you see so many organisms underneath, It's a rock that we don't quite lift, and we don't quite realize what keeps India going and what has kept it going for 5,000 years at a minimum. And these are the people I began to see, digging ponds, cultivating pieces of land, being responsible to the families, and being adherent of a Hinduism, which the learned Hindus, in my humble opinion, don't quite know. They are instinctive Hindus. And that's what I discovered. I think I count myself as one of them because I'm not learned at all. But I'm an instinctive Hindu like them. And every village has a Shakti temple. In Tamil, we call it Mariamman. The worship of the goddess is there. And these are simple people, and they celebrate the festivals by the season. And you know something, it is not yet lost. I work in a village 100 kilometers outside Chennai now. Every week I go. This month of Katakam in Tamil we call it Adi. All the poor people, the well-to-do Indians have forgotten it. The poor people all cook a gruel in the home, every family, take it to the temple and share it with everybody. Just in Tamil, it's called Kulu. There's also fire walking, the village shrines and temples. And this is the people I found very, very humble people. And they don't need to be taught Mahabharata. And I got my Mahabharata from my aunt. And these people, I don't know where they got it. They all got it. But you know something, as an aside, I just want to tell you. In Tamil, there's no Yudhishthir. We call him Dharman. You know, it's a popular name. You will find among the Dalits and the lower caste, many people named Dharman. And the word Dharma is, and they have not read the Mahabharata, they can't read Tamil, they have probably heard a few dance plays in Tirukkutu. Dharma is interchangeably used for an upright man and also to do charity. And it's a popular name. And this is what fascinates me. And I went looking for all these people in Good News India. I met many. And I didn't write about their cultural work or anything. But what I'm trying to say is the people who are adding value to India, that was my search. Who was really adding value to India? Who was keeping it going as it was done for 5,000 years?
I want to ask you more about this part of our civilizational culture and the sort of civilization history that has persisted for 5,000 years. But before that, can you tell us a little bit about Good News India? Your journeys in 1999 led you to start this website, and I think you started this website in 2000 or 2001, and that was really, when the internet was beginning to get known in India, and you started this website then. Can you tell us a little bit about Good News India and its evolution, and then you brought it to a logical point of a logical point in 2012, I believe.
Yeah, not 12. I'll go back a bit. See, I always wanted to write, but I had never written. But I did not either have the courage or the labor to write and send it to somebody and have it reviewed and published. But the internet happened. And just before 2000, I think it happened around 1999. And I must compliment myself for instantly recognizing its power. So I knew at once. It's a powerful new happening. And it used to cost 60 rupees an hour to go and surf in an internet cafe in those days. But I spent 1 or 2 hours and I was blown over. And I must linger here and share a little bit about something else. See, what I liked about my being at sea was it gave me enormous self-confidence and freedom and made me the kind of annoyingly independent and outspoken person that I am today. And that's because I knew that even if a rich man bought 10 ships, his son could not begin as a captain or a chief engineer. He had to start as a 5th engineer and crawl his way up. And I used to call my merchant navy as the Republic. So an aversion for the dynasty or the hereditariness began to take seed there. So going forward, when I found the internet and its power, and I must say that I understood it immediately, and I said, it's going to change the world. I didn't know about information technology, but I had read a book. I still remember his name, Jean-Jacques Servan-Schreiber. He was a Frenchman. And he wrote about the coming information revolution. I misplaced my copy. I lost it. I think I read it in 1970. He forecasted. But then it happened. The internet, when it happened. I said, now I can put up a website and I can write and I don't have to have anyone censoring me. So I can start writing. So that excited me a lot. I learned HTML and then later on I learned a little more skills PHP and database setting up. And then I set up the website myself. I did it all alone, the graphics, the writing, the editorial proofing, the funding, the traveling, the reporting. I did it all by myself. Not because I want to give myself the compliment, but I'm incapable of being a team man. I'm a fiercely independent person. I'm not good in a team at all. I'm a reclusive individual. So that's how I began with Good News India. And then I jumped into a car and I drove by myself. I bought a car for that. I sold a piece of land and I bought myself a Qualis car. It was an aspirational car at the time. And by the time I was already into farming and I was into environment, I had planted quite a few trees, about 400 trees. I had built a windmill, cloth windmill, and pumped water. And then I was on the road for the next 6 years. I wrote that till 2006. And that's Good News India. It's still there online. I don't update it. I can't hear you.
My apologies. I was on mute. Let me come back to what I had, what you had referred to as the cultural alienation. But in many ways, we cannot talk about cultural alienation without also talking about itihas, about history. And I'm not referring to, again, I'm not referring to the Marxist, leftist, communist, rubbish that is shoved down our throats. Even today, despite having a different government at the center, I'm talking about itihas and the general alienation with history that the most urban Indians have. And for what it's worth, we learn about the invasions in northern India by people from Central Asia, Iran, and elsewhere. But if you learn your history like I did in school, we somehow learn that the invasions that the south of India, southern India, was somehow remained untouched by all the upheaval that the north witnessed over several hundred years. But we know now that this is not the truth. The South India also had to face an additional invasion of a very different kind, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's much more subtle. It may not have been as violent as it had been in the north, but I was not quite aware. I'm a product of that invasion South suffered. I think it was enveloped by evangelism. And
I'm sorry, what was that?
Evangelism. And,
evangelism, okay.
The South. I think you were overrun by the Mughals and we were overrun by the church in the South. And I'm a product of the church schools. I mean, I'm quite grateful for the education I received. But it was a very subtle alienation. It induced you. And it put a distance between you and your natural heritage. We were two people. We were one thing at home and another thing at school. And then, of course, the fascination for English because of the jobs and all that. So let us not underestimate. We did not suffer as much violence as the North did. And we were a lot more settled than the North was. I have great sympathy for what the North Indians have gone through. And I think because of them, Hinduism has come through. They have been battered. But in the South, we are not battered, but I think we yielded a lot more ground than the North Indians have done. And that's my assessment at the end of 75 years. It's very counterintuitive. You would have thought that North India would have surrendered to alienation. But no, it is South India that it has done. And North India has salvaged it. And anyway, I do want to talk about it later. But the Islamization of India, Islam met its wall in India. This is the first wall it couldn't quite breach and overpower. And that is, my heart goes out to all the North Indians who stood in the way. Whereas Christianity made a much better job of it in the South. It swept right across. So subsequently, the morphing took over, the communists came. I don't know from where they came. I don't know what constituency they originally had. Because, I want to talk a little bit about this communism. This agitates me. because they have played a terrible role in rendering India where it is. See, I sailed at sea for several years, and 4 years I worked out of Hong Kong on various ships, and my crew was Chinese, you see. I sailed with them. I was a second engineer. In those days, the Chinese didn't have too many people to man the ships which had British flags. And Indians and the British used to man it. The captain was an Englishman. I was a second engineer, and then I became a chief engineer. All the crew was Chinese. And they would all come from Canton. I don't know what it's called now. They come to get jobs. They are quite poor. And the Vietnam War was going on. You see, the common received wisdom in India is that China and Russia, they're communist. This is a little story they sold us. I tell you, I was there throughout the Vietnam War. And in the 4 years, Mao was a nationalist who wore a communist cloak to get his things done. He pretended to be a communist. He was a nationalist. Ho Chi Minh, he also played being a communist. The only fools who got taken in were the Americans. They took them for serious communists, and they said, Dulles philosophy, it's all going to be knocked over. The world is going to be run over by the Reds. We got to eliminate the Reds wherever we find them. So they ventured into this war against Vietnam. China supported it for its own reason. And Russia was quite gleeful. At a very little cost, they could have the war going. But it's a mistake to call them all communists. Ho Chi Minh was a fierce Vietnamese. And as he proved after the Vietnam War, when China tried to wag its tail, he gave it a whack. He says, you and me were communist bedfellows. The war is over. Now leave Vietnam alone. Vietnam will be Vietnamese. They are nationalists. They have thrown communism out of the window. Now, Mao went along with communism for as long as he could. He wanted to get funded. He wanted to establish himself. And he lured Chiang Kai-shek, who was an American puppet, according to him, who went to Formosa, which became Taiwan. I was watching all that. Mao was a nationalist Chinese. And Russia, I shouldn't be lecturing you, you know it, Russians are the ultimate nationalists, going back to the Tsarist times. You read Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, the fierce nationalism of the Russians who stood up to Napoleon and subsequently to Hitler. And now they've thrown away the communism. The only guys who got the communism going is the Indians. And the only place on the planet where the Lal Salam is done is by these fellows. I laugh when I see them. Vietnam is nationalistic. China is nationalistic. Russia is nationalistic. You know what Mao said? I must go back. I was fascinated by Mao at the time. There was no one could enter China. There was a man called Edgar Snow. His book is still there. It was proscribed in India because we got a whack from China in 1962. The book was not allowed. It's called Red Star over China. He was the only person to whom Mao Zedong gave an interview. And he wrote a book about Mao and Lin Piao and Zhou Enlai and all those people. And there I think he says, Americans are honest bastards. Russians are dishonest bastards. And that was, well, he was a communist. And Russia was the home of communism. This was Mao's view of communists. And now look at these Indian communists. They go and do Lal Salam. Anyway, they reinvented themselves as cultural communists now, cultural Marxists. And I would like to talk about it. So this is my experience. I don't know when they call them Russian nationalists and Chinese nationalists and Vietnamese nationalists. Why are we Hindu nationalists? Why are they putting the Muslims out? Why are they shortchanging them? Are they not nationalists? I believe they are. They haven't denied. Why have the Christians not? Why are they not included in the nationalism? Look at this mischief of the Western press. They made me Indian, I tell you. I owe a debt of gratitude for this communist, And Western media, the Guardian, the Economist, and the whole lot. I tell jokingly, we were enslaved by England, now we are enslaved by New England, you know. And this is the slavery, and these guys annoy me. And I'm not a man who is known to pull my punches, and I don't mind saying it like I see it. So, I'm a nationalist. Russia is a nationalist, and today Putin is living it again. He's a pure nationalist. And look at them. They went and claimed Crimea. One part, they said we have a claim to it. And these fellows mock at the Hindus, saying that they're going for Akhand Bharat. Hindus are not even doing it. Our Bharat started at Hebu Darya, the Hindu Kush, and goes all the way. But you can't fault the poor RSS guys in the Vishwa Hindu Parishad for what they're not doing. They're not Akhand Bharat. The Russia is Akhand Russia. China is Akhand China. India is hardly that. And these fellows have their loyalties elsewhere and blame India. And one thing good, I'm grateful for them. They made me good Hindu.
Fascinating. Between the two of us, we could go on for at least a couple of hours just talking about these topics on history and nationalism and communism. But let me come back to, I think you again have it on your Good News India or the Point Return site, and you write that a modern economy cannot create wealth, and you talk about how traditional varieties of rice, for example, are being lost at the rate of several hundred a year. Let me ask you, how do you define a modern economy to begin with, and why do you feel that a modern, don't you believe that a modern economy would help reverse this loss of traditional knowledge that we have been experiencing?
Yeah, no, I'm not a Luddite, and I'm pro-technology and pro-progress. And I do believe in Modi's Vikas. I know I'm not popular among some of my friends for saying it, but I do believe it. It's not that. But I personally feel a civilization must have an ecological sensitivity. India always had. I'm a Hindu, I'm not a well-read Hindu. What fascinates me about Hinduism is the only religion which has got an environmental basis, insofar as I know. Others can contradict me. The concept of the Panchabhutas. And for me, that is what has made me a fierce Hindu. The veneration of the natural elements. And many years later, because somebody told me, I read the Nasatya Sutta. And it's a sheer worship of nature and veneration. So we had the groundedness and ecological, the civilization was ecologically wedded. In the countryside where I now work, I learned the Tamil months much later. All villagers named, they don't say January, February, March. They say Tai, Masi, Pangani, Chitra, Vaikasi, all the Tamil months. And because that's the only way they can understand each other, which month what has to be done. So weddings are performed at a particular time. So we were very close to the soil. We must not lose the connection in the name of Vikas, of progress. And I get very irritated when people say more than 5% of the people need not be on the farmlands. These are economic idiots. I'm sorry. They are mapping the American experience with the Indian experience. We are still 60% in farming. We got to make it better for the farmers. We got to lessen the muscular burden, but we got to have, Hinduism will die if we went away from our ecological moorings. And so, therefore, I say, we got to venerate our farming. We got to venerate our treasure. And therefore, arising out of that is my conviction. So there are only two wells that a country and the people can have. This is my personal opinion, and I could be wrong. It is infinite amount of water that you can store under the ground. I esteem for water. There's only a finite quantity of the water in the world, I know. There's not endless amount of water. But We got to grab and store the water like our ancestors did and keep increasing the fertility of the soil. The more inches of fertile soil that we grow, the more stable a civilization will be. And on that, progress can be built, on that industry can be built. You see, one of my countries that I love is Japan. I'm a huge admirer of Japan. I visited it regularly for 4 years. You know, our Japanese, if you had a plot as big as a handkerchief, you will grow rice in it. So on the one side, that's one culture I wish was a model for India. It has never lost its connection with its heritage. And it's a super modern, cutting edge modern civilization. And that's my role model. That's what I mean. Let's have technology. I hate disposable technology, but I like durable technology. If a plastic bag I load, I carry cloth bags. But a big plastic tank that will last 20 years, that's fine. That's durable technology. Now we've got to make these fine cuts. So I'm not against go away every week to my land, 100 kilometers away. And I must tell you a little bit as to how I came to it, if I may.
Sure.
During my travels, I met many, many people. And some of the stories I would like to own up now. I got to say, I remember some people teased you about having an autographed book of a famous author. And I had a similar moment. I did a story on Arvind Kejriwal, and I've come to market my story. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I heard the name right. Did you say Arvind Kejriwal?
Let me think now. Yes, I did. And I was hugely impressed by that guy. I gave him some money as well when he began the anti-corruption thing. So I got as much as you to live down, Abhinav. So, so anyway, but I met some fascinating people. I saw a man who raised agriculture in 3.5 acres with a hand pump and a well. I saw people who drought-proofed their villages with rainwater harvesting. So I found that and I met Anna Hazare. I have great esteem for him. He was hijacked by this fellow, Arvind Kejriwal, but his work in Ralegaon City is phenomenal. You know, he has done rainwater harvesting. He brought the village back to life. He gave livelihoods. It's a throbbing life. He will be immortal for that. So I went and met him. He gave me a lot of time. And I spoke to him. So I came back at the end of 6 years. I said, I'm writing about other people's story. What is my good news? I have nothing to show. I was just a reporter. So I said, before I earned a right to tell people off, I must earn my brownie points. I got to earn my 20-foot badge. So that's when I went and took this absolutely barren land and started greening it. So that's what brought me. And that's the answer to your question as to why I value our country's ecological basis. It is a must.
So, and that is why you named your latest venture as Point Return, and you say that the point is to return. It is to return to nature what we take from it, and a lot more actually we take from nature than we return to it, right?
Yeah. I call it point return. I don't know. I'm not well read in our philosophy and thing, but I know my life. My life has been pretty long, and ever since Harikiran and others and you suggested that I should talk, I didn't quite realize that I had lived 3/4 of a century. And I am a fiercely proud Indian today. I am a nationalist Hindu. Yes, you want to call me an RSS man, I'll proudly own that up. I don't care. But we have made tremendous progress in this country. So let's not belittle that. You know, we have graduated a decimal system. We graduated a metric measure. And I remember from my school days that I used to, you know, we had only one textbook to share, and people took turns to read it for others to listen. So everyone didn't have a copy. And quite often I was asked to read because I had a loud voice. And I remember reading, it still rings in my ears. India is a large country of 340 million people. In my lifetime, we have quadrupled. And there were 20 different railways. And we integrated that, we bound it, we became a nation. Along the way, I didn't know why we didn't ask the communists to get off the train, but then they are still around, fellow riders. But I'm very proud of all that. But now I think that we run the risk of cutting ourselves away from our ancestral knowledge. Because I don't know, some of the learned friends in Indic Book Club can tell us the ecological roots of Hinduism. And I think that should not be forgotten. If you do that, you will disown a number of people who are living close to the soil. And they have internalized the Mahabharata and Ramayana better than some of the learned people. And we will cut them away from Hinduism. So an ecological basis for Hinduism is absolutely necessary. So instead of lecturing about it, nobody would listen to me if I lectured. I'm not capable of gathering the audience. But I said, let me go and do it and write about it. And I said, the point is to return. And I think life divides into two phases. Everyone's life, according to me, one is the venturing, the other is the returning. And I'm in the returning phase. I have ventured, and I'm happy I ventured. I had exciting adventures. I traveled the world, I lived the world. I never lived to a template. I'm not the standard template Hindu, but I'm not returning. And that is why I said, the tagline to my website says, the point is to return. And return to the roots, return to happiness, return the gifts received in life. The point is to return.
A ghar vapsi, if I may put it that way, a ghar vapsi to the house that we have always had. So, DV, first of all, again, I'll say thank you so much for this, for sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your memories, your anecdotes. At this point, I would like to. What I will do is I'm going to unmute everyone, and you can actually ask questions. If your line is not unmuted, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. So please go ahead. Or if you want, you can even send in your question through chat. I am monitoring the chat, so if you send a question, I will read it out and DB can answer it.
Yeah, Abhinav, I want to go first.
Please.
I don't have a question for DVS, but I just want to express my gratitude, deep-felt gratitude. I believe IBC and Indic Academy is like a startup. And for any startup, the first check that you get from any outsider who backs you up is very important. And for me, the DVS's commitment and his support, when I met him last year at Bangalore, I was meeting him for the first time. I was introduced to him by my friend in Singapore, Anant Nageshwaran. And I met him in Bangalore. And we were all, our post-workshop, we were having dinner, we were chatting. And then he said, you know what, I like what you're doing. I want to give you some money. Then I was like, this is the greatest thing to get. It's a not-for-profit, but to get a certificate of endorsement of what you're doing by somebody whom I just met that day was an incredible experience. And then I went and saw his farm. I also spent a day with him. He was a little afraid this guy is like a dharmic guy. Can I offer him a beer? I said, sure, DVS, let's have a beer. So we had lunch and we had some beer and then we had some good fun. And after that, it's been an incredible journey with him. He's always there. And he's again recently given me some money for a new work that we're doing called the Indic Activist Network. So DVS, I'm extremely grateful, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for being there, and thank you for supporting me. Thank you.
DV, you're muted. I think you need to unmute your line, or let me do it for you.
Good, please.
Okay, anyone else wants to ask a question, you can unmute your line.
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Hari, I mean, I saw a video by you explaining your vision, quite accidentally, Indic Academy. I had not known. But that was part of Swarajya. I know Ananta Nageshwaran, my friend Anant, I call him. He writes for Swarajya. And Anant has been a long-time well-wisher and a great friend. And he was one of the early admirers of Good News India. And I told Anant, I said, I want to meet this person. So by the time I was convinced that someone had to do something about Hinduism that was being buffeted by the communist guys and others. So, strangely, it gives me an opportunity to tell you a little bit about money. I was not born rich. I came from a very, very modest family, and I didn't have money till I was 50, 55, 60. I don't know where my money has come. I have considerable amount of money. I'm quite smart when I want to make money in the stock market or whatever I do, but I don't anymore. I don't chase money. But the money I have is disproportionate to my intelligence, hard work, or goodness. That's honest. I'm not being falsely modest. That's absolutely honest. I have a feeling that it has come to me for a particular purpose, and I got to find the purpose. And I am very, very fiercely devoted to salvaging this country in the hands of these vampires or the hawks that walk the country. But I hope Abhinav will give me a chance again to talk about my political views. I do want to. But the next question, Abhinav.
Oh, anytime. We would we'd be thrilled to have you again, DV. Dimple, you had raised your hand. You had a question.
Yes, DV. I mean, it was really insightful listening to you, and it's my proud privilege to know you. I mean, the little that I know of you, I just feel that you have truckloads of books within you. Can we see some book coming in the near future, probably? And I believe it's your birthday sometime soon. I'm not gonna say when. Do we expect some book from your end, perhaps?
No, I think for me a full-length book writing is passé now. I think I got far too many things committed. I don't think I can. I hope to write articles like I've done. And I was diffident. And you, Dimple, were of great help. And you are my literary agent. You promoted me and you got me published. I was mighty excited. All these days, I have published everything I wrote. And this was good to be. So I hope to be able to write. And the politics and the secular humbug that angers me, I write best when I'm angered. So I suppose I will write. I'm not a cool writer. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an objective person. So I don't know what books. But thanks for asking. Thanks for thinking that I have a book in me. Who knows?
Thank you. Thanks, Abhinav.
We'll hope. We'll hope that a book comes out. Okay. So obviously, if you don't have any questions, or if you think of a question later on, you can send it on the Indic group, or you can you can tag DV on Twitter. His Twitter handle, I believe, is Straws in the Wind. And you can tag a question to him. You can even tag Indic Academy on Twitter and ask your question, or Indic Academy is also on Facebook. So keep the conversation going. Thank you, DV, once again for this wonderful Indic chat, and thank you everyone for tuning into this Indic chat. We will put this up on YouTube shortly, and thank you once again, and have a good day.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for talking to me.